Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. My name is Charlotte Dobre and today's video is a question you might think you have the answer to. But perhaps the answer to this question is not what you think it is. And that question is, are vampires real? Let's start things off with a bit of history, shall we? A traditional vampire is a being from folklore who feeds off the blood of the living. The idea of a supernatural being consuming the living has been found in almost every culture. The act of drinking blood is something a demon would do, or perhaps even the devil. The Persians were one of the first civilizations to incorporate blood-drinking demons into their folklore. Images of demons consuming the blood of men have been found on excavated pottery. The Greeks and Romans had Empusa, daughter of Hecate. Empusa is said to have feasted on the blood of men she seduced so she could turn into a young woman. Fast forward to medieval times, where many of the original vampire folklores are said to have originated. 12th century English historians Walter Map and William of Newburgh chronicled stories of revenants, which are visible ghosts or animal corpses which are said to have been revived from death to haunt the living. The word revenant has Latin roots in the word reveniens, which means returning. Stories of vampires in the medieval period were however limited. Vampires as we know them today really began popping up in Eastern European folklore in the late 17th and 18th centuries. One of the earliest references to vampire activity was in 1672, and it came from Istria, which is now modern Croatia. Local reports tell of a local vampire named Jur Grando. Jur died in 1656, but villagers claimed that he rose from the dead and would go around drinking blood from the locals. The villagers demanded a stake be driven through his heart, but reports say that this method failed to kill him, and his head was cut off. Once he was beheaded, the villagers were no longer tormented by his presence. This tale is the earliest known record of a person who was said to be a vampire. Then, in the 18th century, vampire frenzy hit. There were sightings all over Europe and grave diggings and stakings were common. Vampire panic was so widespread, even the government was involved in the hunting and staking of so-called vampires. A French theologian, Dom Augustin Calmer, wrote a treatise called the Treatise on the Apparition of Spirits and on Vampires or Revenants. This attempted to investigate the existence of vampires and demons. Upon conducting extensive research, this is what he wrote. They see, it is said, men who have been dead for several months come back to earth, talk, walk, infest villages, ill-use both men and beasts, such the blood of their near relations, make them ill, and finally cause their death. Calmet was read by many great minds of the time, including Voltaire, who took this treatise as a fact. And let's not forget Count Dracula, the character from the immensely popular Gothic horror novel written by Bram Stoker in 1897. It is believed that some aspects of Dracula were inspired by Vlad the Impaler, who was also nicknamed Dracula. Though Vlad did not drink blood, he was famous for his favorite form of torture: impalement. Tales of Dracula's cruelty and apparent thirst for blood only fueled the fire. Vampire hysteria in Europe only ended after the Empress Maria Theresa of Austria sent her personal physician to investigate if vampires were real or not. He concluded that no, they did not exist, and the mass grave openings and desecration of dead bodies ended. Okay, so you know that vampires were common in folklore, but does that mean that they truly exist? Well, the fact is, the traditional idea of a vampire might not be what real vampires are like. John Edgar Browning has studied vampires in film and literature all his life. While he was a doctoral candidate at Louisiana State University, he was visiting New Orleans, the supernatural capital of America, trying to track down real vampires. Real vampires are people who claim to have a medical condition that requires them to drink blood, either human or animal. He found one. Browning approached a woman in a shop and started talking to her about his study of real vampires. The woman smiled to reveal sharp teeth that had been filed down to resemble fangs. Several weeks later, he met an elder vampire who invited him to attend meetings of the New Orleans Vampire Association. Vampire communities do exist, but they mostly keep to themselves, because they are aware that the public's outlook toward vampires is not what one would call welcoming. According to Browning, symptoms of vampirism start around puberty. People affected begin to feel drained for no apparent reason, and one way or another they figure out that consuming blood helps relieve those symptoms. Blood relieves fatigue because it is rich in iron. This may seem like crazy talk, but people who practice vampirism do so because they do not have a choice, and not drinking blood can lead to serious health problems. Many vampires keep their condition a secret from their doctors because they are afraid of being scrutinized. So far, no medical explanation is offered for vampirism. So do vampires exist? Well, that depends on what your definition of a vampire is. If you're thinking the supernatural undead being that feeds off the blood of the living, Then probably not. But vampirism does exist. People who identify themselves as vampires do exist, and there are over 5,000 of them living in the United States alone. There are around 50 vampires in every major city. They could be sitting next to you at a coffee shop, or riding next to you on the subway. The question is, could you accept them if they were to come out from the shadows? I'm Charlotte Dobre for Life's Biggest Questions. Don't forget to like that video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to LBQ.